Welcome to this introductory video on how to use CREO Parametric for use in Year 7 to 10 engineering. The idea of this introductory video is to introduce you to some of the techniques, skills, and manipulation techniques that are going to be required in order to master this program to develop a number of 2D and 3D objects that need to be extruded and either used on things such as our 3D printer, our laser cutter, or submitted as part of DT projects and other aspects of your school subjects. So by the end of this quick session, which should go for about 15 minutes, you should be able to understand how some of the menus work, how to understand what happens when you create an object and something goes wrong, how you can edit that, undo it, change it without panicking and wondering how you're going to get back to some different levels. So let me take you through a few of the things first. So when you go into the PTC CREO program, this is the standard interface that you'll get. Now, one of the things that I recommend at the start is that you set a working directory. So if you click on this option here, select working directory allows you to create a folder where all of your CREO files will be located. Now, if you're on a school notebook, this will be slightly different, and your classroom teacher may actually advise you to use a thing called your H drive. So where it says C here, it'll be H. If you're on your own personal device, you won't have that. I would recommend that you put it somewhere where you know you're going to access it. If it's on your desktop, that's fine. I would actually recommend, if possible, to actually sync it into your Google Drive account. Now, that's something new that we're using at the school. It can be a little hard to find, and I'll show you quickly how you can actually locate that. So one of the options you can do is to think about where your Google Drive is stored. Now, if it's on a Mac and on a Windows, it's going to be very, very different. But you should all be using Windows on all of your different machines. So you'll notice that I clicked at the folder tree option at the bottom of the screen, which gives me a more detailed list. If you are to save it to your Google Drive, mine is located on my D drive. Yours might be your C drive, Google Drive, and you can store it in that location. And what that means is that your files and folders are always backed up. Now, commonly on your machines, your Google Drive will be located in My Documents on the left-hand side, and we'll say a folder called Google Drive. I would recommend that you're actually using that for backup purposes, and that means that everything you do is backed up. You won't have to worry about it being lost or any issues when it comes to assignment time. So for the time being, as a demo, I'm just going to say my working directory, which I've already got set, is in my Documents area. And what that means is that everything I do is going to be saved in that area. And I go CREO 2016 and OK. So to explain some of the things, you do have some display options you can change. This is our common folder area. So if you did have it stored in a different area, you could go and find it very quickly. Open, so you can open the existing project. Our file option, as you can see, I've worked on quite a few things here. There's quite a few different objects located on different drives, some USBs and so forth. But primarily going to work from the home area, and you're going to go new. Now, just to explain this basic interface at the start, there's a lot of things here you may or may not use. So sketch is obviously for drawing. Part, which is primarily what we use in our engineering courses. So this will be design our basic shapes and patterns and extrude them into different objects. Assembly is where we get multiple parts, as you can tell from the icon, and join them together. Why is that important? Well, that's important if we're using our laser cutter, that we want our pieces to fit perfectly together. By having them fit perfectly together, we know that when we've actually laser cut our project, we won't have any assembly issues, thus the name assembly. Manufacturing, drawing, format report, diagram, notebook, and markup are not really used in the basic courses and not really part of our introductory process. What I want to show you at the bottom here is, obviously the default name is PRT, so meaning part 0001, the basic file name. If you, for example, and I'm going to do a brick as today's exercise, just as a quick demo, I went brick 2016 and I left a space in between those two things, this is going to give me an error. This is a legal character. The reason for that being is we can't have a space, we have to have an underscore or something that joins the two. If I go OK, we get our basic interface come up, and you'll notice it looks very quickly like this screen here. If you see your menu is different up the top here, you need to see your classroom teacher. It just requires a slight change to the configuration file to get the same display that we're using here. So by now you would have understood how the top function works, the front, and the right by completing some graphs in class. That will give you an understanding of what's a top surface, what's a front surface, and what's a right surface. So when you're rotating it in a 3D space, that you can get a fair idea of where to add material, where to remove material. Let me just go through and explain some of the common features of this program. At the top of the screen here, regenerate is when you're working with an object and you want to sort of refresh and you're having an issue where you've worked on one part, or it could be in an assembly, and it's not linking to your assembled part. The regenerate button will update the screens you're working with. The plane is obviously these features here that we're looking at on the screen, so a plane of these parts here. So we've got our axis, which you learn in mathematics, which creates a point of a reference. Our points we can do, and our coordinate system, so an X, Y, Z pattern. Sketching is for our drawing on a flat surface. Extruding takes our 2D shape and extrudes it into a 3D pattern, which we'll be looking at shortly. Revolve looks, as you see, a little bit of a donut tool. Take one pattern, you can rotate it in 360-degree angles. Sweeping tool creates vases. You can take a basic part and extrude on the vertical. And the sweep blend tool is not something we're going to use, but as you can tell from the pattern, it does a fairly similar function to the other two. Patterns we don't use in this particular course interface. So let's just do something really quick. On the left-hand side here, you notice that the name of our part is called brick_2016 part. With our surfaces front, as you see I do that, it highlights on the right, front, top, right. And we've got our axes, and you'll start to see our extrusion layers coming here in a moment. So the first part is I want to extrude a layer by working on the top surface. So I click on that and I go extrude. You'll notice that the screen rotates. Now that's giving me a plane in which I can draw an object. As soon as I've done that, I get a totally different screen up here. Now what this allows me to do is I can actually start drawing some things. So rectangles, circles, arcs, ellipses, and a few other things here. A chamfer tool for edges, which we'll do in a much more detailed course later on. And we can delete some segments. Now one of the things you need to understand with CREO is everything must be joined perfectly, because remember, it's being printed or laser cut out, and it deals with precise measurements. It cannot deal with imprecise or unjoined or unfinished lines. So let's do something very easy. We're going to draw a rectangle on the screen because we are doing our brick, and I'm just going to draw it. So click once, let go of your mouse, move across the screen. Now you notice we've got our H's for our horizontal and V's for our verticals, and occasionally you'll get these L's that pop up. What the L stands for is that those two areas, the horizontal and vertical, are now exactly the same measurement, so we've formed a perfect square. As soon as I drag it out to the left, I lose that and we're back to our standard rectangle. So for what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to be a little bit askew because we're going to fix that in a minute. And you click once more with your mouse. It allows you to draw more rectangles, which you could do, but we're going to stick with the basic design. Clicking back on our select tool will change the screen that we've got here. So mine's working in millimeters, so just be careful that you are in millimeters. If it is laser cut or 3D printed, the teacher will check to make sure it is correct. Now this gives you the option to change what you're working with. So for the moment, if I say I want to have it 50 off this axis here, I can double click with my mouse, put in 50 and go enter. I'm going to make my rectangle length 100, double click. Actually, I might make it a little bit bigger because it's easy to see on the screen. Let's go even bigger. Let's go 400. Now, as you see, I've got it off this line. We'll fix this in a moment. Now, when I'm working here, I say, oh, well, if it's 400, wouldn't it, if I've got my axis line here, wouldn't I have 200 this side and 200 that side? Well, let's do that. Let's see what happens. So I double click here, 200. And as you see, it's moved it. So it's now 200 here, and I can be certain that it's also 200 here. Keeping our levels, or sorry, our measurements in proportion, if I double click on the 65.91, just double click and type in 100, get a fairly uniform sort of rectangle. There's a lot going on, lots of words and lots of lines, and if you actually click up here to our display filters, you can turn off a lot of these features, so you can have a bit more of an easy view of what you're looking at. I like them on. You could turn them off. That's more a personal preference. I'll show you some of these other features in a moment. Once you've finished with that and you've got your measurements correct, you must have it right at this point, and I will show you how to add them later on. Yes, on the left here, Extrude 1 has now popped up. little tiny yellow thing to the side saying we're not quite finished. As soon as I hit the tick, we move to our next screen. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier. We've got a few different menus come up the top here. And you can see 216.51 millimeters is actually our depth of the rectangle. How do I see that visually? I click and hold my middle scroll button on my mouse and I rotate. I just move the mouse and I can see 216.51. There's a few ways you can alter this measurement. I can click up here, go 100, press enter, it changes it. I can click on this white line, manually move it. I can double click on the number here and also change it. Changes it up the top. And if you got it in the wrong direction, you're like, oh, that should have gone the other way. This arrow flips it in the other direction. You can move it very, very quickly. So it effectively is doing this, it moves it around. So if I go that way, go 100, so it's easy to see. Give it a little bit of rotate, remove some of these extra menus so you can see it a bit more in a plain fashion. I've got my sort of, yeah, that looks very much like a bit of a brick. So it's a very even sort of object. I would say it's not a perfect brick, but for our activity we're going to do, you'll get some more precise measurements from your classroom teacher soon. Now when you sometimes rotate and you get some weird views and you're like, where was the top, where was the side, where was the front? There are some options to actually change how you're viewing it. So if you click on this button here, which is our orientation button, standard orientation, you got back, bottom, fronts, isometric, which we won't do in this particular lesson, and of course our top view. Now top view is what we started out with. To scroll in, just scroll in with your mouse and you'll get it bigger and smaller. And we have our basic view. Once you're happy with that, we won't really use these tools at the moment. You tick it, and you notice our extrude's now got rid of our yellow thing, and we also have our section part. But remember, our brick has just disappeared. Why? Because I can't see it. So let's just go save orientation, and we want to look at the top, sticks it back into the screen for us. Now, as you see, it's up the top there. If you hold down the shift key and click and hold the mouse, you can actually bring it more into a working area. There's quite a few tricks and things like that you can do with it. So that's holding down the shift key, don't let go of it, then click in the middle scroll mouse, you can move it around the screen. Right, let's have a bit of fun. What we're going to do is extrude another layer. So we click on extrude, click on our top surface. You notice it goes to like a light green sort of color. So we click on that, or there are other options up here where you can move and do it manually, but we'll just click here. As you see, it's now gone down the bottom. Now with this surface, we're going to put some holes in it, or we'll probably add some holes, remove some holes, we'll do a couple of different things. Click on our circle, and I'm just going to click somewhere in this object. That will be fine. Click once, move the mouse, click again. Same thing. Now you notice by default it actually keeps our axis on the same level. So if I go to the middle, click drag, as soon as I get the R, I know the radius is the same. Same thing again, roughly to the end. Click once more, drag it out, click again, and I've got my 3 circles. I can go back to my mouse, and here's where it starts to get interesting. So if I zoom in a little bit hard to see some of these, I'll highlight that. It says I've got my width there, let's just go 50, keep it very even. As soon as I change that, all 3 of them are changed. But let's say I want to get the space from this edge of the circle to right of the edge of my rectangle. I can click the normal button, click once on the edge of the circle, click again on this edge, middle click, I get a distance. And I might say, I want that to be 40 away from that edge, bang, it moves across there. Holding my shift key, I could do the same at the other end, so click on that button here, click once, middle click, and let's make that 40. So we've actually got a fairly even sort of surface that we've got here. So we've got our circle, which has got our equal widths to it there. We don't really need to change too much on our object. Once we're happy, we're only drawing this in what you see as a 2D space. We go OK, and this is where we get our next functions. I'm just going to rotate this object so you can see. If I click and scroll with it, I see I've got these 3 things coming out. Now, same as before. If I go that way, as you see, it's created the holes. If I bring it back, I can click on this white thing. I can extrude out, I can extrude through. Once you extrude through and remove material, it's got no relevance. There's nothing there. You could also go part way through if you wanted to create a bit of a cavity. You can do a few things, or of course you can come back and you can say that's 100. Now I'm going to go all the way through for this particular exercise. You do have some other options here about changing the way material comes through. If you've got surfaces that are angled, you can get it where it actually does the measurements for you. Gives you a nice smooth plane which you can work from. And we have our remove material functions up here. We tick it, and we now have our brick that we're looking at. But you're going to make mistakes. So how do you fix it? Let me show you. On the left over here, we've got a number of extrudes. The first simplest option, delete the extrusion, and that will get rid of any changes that have happened on the screen. But let's say I want to edit it. I can click here, I can right click, and here I can get some of my measurement features back. So here I can see I've got my little radius here, but let's say, oh, I really want that to be 100. Bang, I can change it very, very quickly within the screen itself. Of course, try and keep it that it looks correct. So we've got 50 there. That's not too bad, that's worked out okay. Now, I can get further editing options as well as I start going through. Now you notice my yellows come back, it's saying, oh, you've changed something. I've gone back to a different level here where I can actually edit some more patterns. Once I've got that, I'm fine. If you make a mistake, you want to start that particular extrude, just right click. You can go delete, you can suppress the changes if you want to see what it looks like without those things. If you say, well, it looks better without, you could delete or skip straight to that step. But let's say my first step, the very first one I drew, was not how I wanted it to actually be. I can go back and edit my original drawing. So by clicking down there, right clicking on section 1 and going to the D1 tool, I can change the widths and heights. And as you remember, I mentioned it wasn't quite right. I can change what it looks like. So go to 300, go OK. Shift, scroll, move. Actually, I might need to zoom out a little bit. It's not quite looking like a brick, but it's not too bad. And once I've done that, I can then add another extrude. Click on here. I'm just going to add one circle for the moment. Click on that again. Go OK. Rotate it so you can see. And just for a bit of play, I'm going to go all the way through. I've got my object. And of course, remember to save. If you wanted to change the name, you can do that as well. You do have the option to change the names of the things that you're working with. But yeah, very, very key to hit the save button. And of course, at this point, as you see, you've got to make sure you hit the green tick. So I've given a little bit of a problem there while I was thinking about it. So it's very important to save, tick your work. If you're getting an error, just make sure there's no lines or any areas that have popped up that could be causing a problem. And if I tick that, I then get my save button, and my brick is now saved. I go OK. It's saved. Enjoy, give it a go.